I'm recording.
Can you hear me now? Yes, it does.
Excuse me, my crayon is a monkey. I find this conversation
Taking some interest in learning a bit more about technology, philosophy, and I like to.
I'm an educator.
Absolutely. We're going to stay anonymous.
That's a cop out.
The binary's gone. I thought jingle was like Dutch for cheers.
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 12, the Brexit edition of Beyond Binary Thinking.
The purpose of this podcast is to talk about cultural events with enough nuance to break through the echo chambers, and change the news cycles and the Russian bots, talk about things in an informative and fun way.
So, as quick as we are to criticize social media, we'd still like to thank all the Facebook comments for all your thoughts on Brexit and helping us prepare for this episode.
From London, I'm Chris.
From Amsterdam, I'm Marijn.
From Stockholm, I'm Toby.
From London, I'm Finn.
So I need to open with an apology to everyone I've been trolling for the last 4 years on the topic of Brexit.
Certainly so.
I love to play devil's advocate. I don't like things being oversimplified. The whole point of this podcast is that anytime I hear people say, oh, like, this is left-wing and this is smart and everyone who disagrees with me is stupid and racist and wrong. So because of that, I just intentionally have just been surrounding myself with the best pro-Brexit arguments I could over the last few years. And then every time I get drunk, picking a fight on Facebook about it and ruining the occasional family Christmas. I don't think Brexit, I don't even understand how it ever became a left-right issue, but I do sort of understand why people voted for Brexit. I think both sides are guilty of oversimplifying their opponents' views. So hopefully today we can add a bit of nuance, have a decent conversation which is funny, and if you're going to disagree with me, then yeah, be persuasive. I think there's a lot of people like me that are happy arguing for Brexit, but there's probably more people who just bite their tongue and don't get in this conversation because it often becomes so hostile. So hopefully you guys can persuade me. Good luck. So congratulations, Toby. You are the funniest troll in all of the Facebook comments, so we thought we'd bring you on. So if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us your take on Brexit.
Thank you for having me, actually. It's an absolute pleasure. Although I object to being described as a troll. I'm a very serious person, which I'm hoping to convince you guys. I am a very serious individual, and I think Brexit is, frankly, is a great idea. I mean, Britain being relegated to a backwater non-entity would be a fitting punishment for the horrors that the British Empire has inflicted upon the globe.
I have to agree with that one.
Yeah, I mean, if you consider it, like having a small island nation on the corners of Europe is being exploited by a larger power such as America, I think, what comes around goes around. It's going to be great.
We can play ping pong with you. We'll just ping pong you between the European Union and America. Where are you going to go?
I mean, I've been saying for years, actually, England was never part of the EU. England should have been part of the Carribean. And the sooner you can start shifting the island further westwards, I mean, the better.
Well, if global warming happens, we don't have to, right? We will just become Europe's Caribbean. Lovely.
Yeah. That's the solution for Brexit. Brilliant.
Except for the horrible beaches.
Hey.
Whoa.
Come on now. Let's not make it personal.
Western Supermare is lovely, I've heard.
I'm not going to say too much, I think, this episode, just try and make a few jokes here and there. But I'd say probably the main reason I think Brexit's not a great idea is probably the way it's been done, because it's stretched out now beyond 3 years probably, and it's kind of put the political dialogue in the UK on hold, more or less, particularly in terms of the climate talks, agreements, plans, things we need to do to avert this looming apocalypse, which we discussed on the last episode. In fact, me and Chris were in London yesterday on the global climate strike.
Oh, well done.
And that was great to see about 100,000 people in London.
And Jeremy Corbyn, that was fun.
Yeah, we saw Jezza giving a little speech. Personally, I don't think it went far enough, but...
That's great. So global warming's now solved, or...?
Not yet.
It's a start. The wave has to start somewhere, right?
The fact that two main political parties were giving speeches there, I think is a good start.
That's brilliant.
But there's a lot more to go.
I think if you believe that the Conservatives have been slowed down by Brexit, and if it wasn't for that, they would have pursued an agenda of changing the world and making the environment better, you haven't been paying attention to the Conservative Party. If anything, Brexit slowed them down from their plans of gutting the NHS. It's brilliant. Like, it's just distracted them while they go through this internal political turmoil.
That's been a benefit.
Yes.
It's just kind of
just stop the Conservatives from doing anything.
No, I mean, it's changed the political landscape of the UK. Now, after Farage and UKIP kind of brought the whole thing on, in a sense, even though they're a fringe party, now I think that we're seeing a shift towards the Greens and potentially like a more environmentally friendly outlook. Who knows if that will happen if Brexit really goes ahead?
You don't think that this has just emboldened the far right, though? Surely that's the largest growing demographic of just outspoken racists who feel emboldened by Brexit.
As easy as it is to simplify,
Sargon of Akkad was running for bloody MP slot.
Well, yeah, and how did that go for him?
He
terribly.
He
Got
crashed
destroyed.
and
The
burned
personification
hilariously.
of the YouTube comments didn't do well in politics. I'm glad to hear.
Yeah, actually, that kind of gives you a little bit of hope for the future, I suppose.
Yes. I think it's also easy to pick on people like that who obviously have a racist, anti-immigrant, pro themselves and their own publicity agenda. But there's always been a proportion of people who are uncomfortable with the relationship with the EU. And as easy as it is to pick on David Cameron's lurch to the right and this idea of calling a referendum instead of a Tory leadership, it was always needed to call a referendum. Like, it would have had to happen at some point. The EU started as a trading bloc and has morphed into this political United States of Europe. And it is only fair and democratic to ask people if they were happy with that. And I think no one was really surprised when the majority of British people said, no thanks.
Well, because people were just lying to them. Like, it's like you tell people a bunch of lies, and then you're like, are you happy about this? And they're like, no, of course not. Because they weren't voting with the full set of facts.
Mm-hmm.
But you're just describing every election ever. This is not the first politicians to lie during an election, right? It doesn't invalidate an election.
No, sure, but this is a dangerous idea to be toying with. And you're discovering it, because it was very easy to invoke the article, but it's very hard now to figure out how to actually implement it, right? And we're nearing the deadline of deadlines, which is January 2021, which is when the transition period has to be over. And the longer all these trade agreements take, the shorter the transition period gets. Europe is annoyed. Corporations are annoyed, right?
Oh, boo-hoo.
It's been so many years because the idea to be like, oh yeah, we'll leave. The fantasy of leaving the EU was fantastic. And then the reality kicked in. Wait, what is a trade union really about? What does it involve exiting a trade union? Maybe we need to implement borders now because we need custom checks. This is the whole idea of the European Union. It's a trade union.
And also, Chris, as you were saying, like, yes, it's morphed into a political union, and so the British people needed to have a voice in the matter. But how were they hurting under the EU? Like, what horrors had the EU been inflicting on the British people that they needed to get out of the EU? Considering,
something about bananas, wasn't it?
Yeah, bananas.
Bananas, cucumbers,
European migration policies,
something
maybe?
like that, I think.
Well, that's the big one, isn't it? It was politically very inexpedient of the EU to make a point of pushing migration quotas on European countries. Like that was going to be very unpopular from the start.
But yeah, you say that, but it was Tony Blair in 2004 that just allowed unfettered migration to the UK, whilst the rest of the EU, they put on limits on how many migrants from the new countries, like Poland, the Eastern Bloc, yada yada. It was Tony Blair who was like, yeah, sure, everyone can just come here. It's the UK who made their own decision when it came to migration.
Yeah.
The EU didn't force anything.
Yes, I agree. But here's the problem. British politicians for decades have been blaming the EU for everything that goes wrong. They use the EU as a scapegoat, and it's not our fault, it's the EU. And this is why I'm sympathetic to the Brexit position, because although I don't believe that, I think politicians should be accountable, and it's really weak forever having a scapegoat that our politicians can wash their hands and be like, oh, it's not our fault, it's their fault. And it's just amazing to me that the political class spent 30 years telling people it's all the EU's fault. And then when they had a referendum, they were shocked when people went, "Well, I think quite negatively about the EU." Like, of course they did.
Call it a fair referendum then again, because you can't. It's not a fair referendum. It was a referendum that was pushed by the Murdochs of the world and by a certain political group. Ever since that political group is trying to push it through, no matter the cost lately, which is inflicting major damage on the political system in England. The Queen is being abused for it now.
Oh,
poor Liz. Well, it's because they what they don't like about the EU is the regulations. They want to deregulate the UK, turn her into some sort of tax haven, have a place where you can export dechlorinated chicken or chlorinated chicken, whatever they want to export to the UK. They just want like a little tax haven here, and yeah, go for it.
So by tax haven, you mean like a booming financial sector that will be very hard for the EU to compete with? And by chlorinated chickens, you mean a lot more trade with the US?
Why would the EU have problems with competing with the UK? Like, what does the UK produce that the EU doesn't?
Financial services, unfettered by EU regulations.
So that's the only thing you're going to rely upon then.
Basically, yeah.
This
Restaurants.
late-stage disaster capitalism.
We've got Nando's
brilliant.
as well, too. I don't know if they have Nando's in Portugal, because they have actual Portuguese food. So, the City of London and Nando's, yes, that's what I'm hanging my argument on.
Poundland. Weatherspoons.
Legoland. Oh no, you guys probably have that too. So.
I think Legoland's pretty Danish, but yeah.
Yeah, that's all right.
Oh, the most British things I can think of are the royal family and Legoland. And,
export the royal family. That's a good
English.
export product, the royal family.
Well, they're a bunch of Germans. I think you should deport them. But
Yeah, what's going to happen if Brexit happens and everyone realises they're all German?
they're all ruled by Germans
I don't think,
and have been
is
for
it true
centuries.
The Queen doesn't have a passport,
Right.
because what would the point in her issuing herself a passport?
It's probably true, because
She
it
doesn't have
says...
to write herself a letter saying, "I give myself
Yeah, I
permission
can
to
travel. Well done, Queenie.
Can I just go back to my original point of you still technically didn't answer how was the British population suffering under the EU? Like
Right.
what is it that the Brexiteers really want to change now that you're leaving the E EU?
I believe in decentralisation. I believe that small groups are more efficient than big groups. I think the EU would be a very good trading bloc, but it's become a political bloc made in the Soviet era of if we get enough states together in some huge world parliament, then somehow that'll be better.
Yeah, because economies of scale isn't a thing.
Yeah, but it did get better in a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways, yes, but if you look at the software industry, right, all the time, David beats Goliath because Goliath is inefficient, massive, slow to move, right? And a smaller company is a lot more flexible, agile, able to respond quicker than this big, massive, amorphous bloc. As easy as it is to beat up on Britain for the EU negotiations, it's quite damning of the EU that as a trading bloc, it takes them so long to set up trade deals. It took, 12 years for the deal with Canada? Longer for Japan? You've got to admit, as a trading bloc, they're pretty bad at setting up trade deals.
Okay, I have an interesting question for you. So how would you like this Scotland saying, like, well, we're a smaller entity. Let's leave your union.
They all voted to remain.
Yeah, for now.
There you go.
Well,
so the referendum binds, and we must honour it democratically.
Yeah. It will introduce another land border, which is impossible. So let's please not go into separating Scotland.
But that argument cuts both ways. Everyone's very sympathetic to Scotland's wish to be separate and independent. But when Britain does it, it's a joke and it's embarrassing.
But so what happens when Cornwall wants independence?
I think their economy would match Bulgaria's.
Bulgaria does really good wine.
Loads of scrumpy they got to sell.
So I'm entirely sympathetic towards a bunch of places not wanting to be led by London or Brussels, and I think it's an even worse situation to have led by London, who then takes no responsibility for their actions and blames Brussels for everything. I understand the wish of people to devolve power.
But that doesn't answer Toby's question, right? His question was, what specific thing can't people do as part of the EU?
But, look, I personally think the EU is a good thing, but I understand why the majority of people have been led to believe that
But
it's
the
not.
question isn't, do you understand why people want to leave? The question is, what can't people do under the EU? There doesn't seem to be any specific thing, any problem that's being solved. Is that your point, Toby?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, because they trot out immigration, like, yes, but the UK could already control its immigration. The big thing is that you have to accept EU nationals, like ourselves, who have lived in the UK, because we, as EU nationals, we've been able to move to the UK without any problems whatsoever. That's gonna, disappear. So in the UK's pursuit of new trade deals, they're going to have to offer free movement to non-European nations. Like India is already gearing up to offering a free movement deal. Other sort of non-European nations are going to be like, oh, excellent. Well, can we send our people? And I don't think that's what immigration hardliners wanted.
Yeah.
No, but I'm very pleased to see it because I'm pro-immigration, and I think it's a crime of all our history with India that we don't accept Indian immigrants because why?
Because of xenophobia, right? It's simple. A lot of people are
It's not
xenophobic.
that they're not accepted, but it's hard.
I think it'll be a massive boom to our tech industry when we start accepting more Indian immigrants.
Yeah, but don't get me wrong. I'm a sort of no borders absolutist. I think borders are ridiculous. I think, sure, open your borders, let as many people as want. But the people who voted for Brexit, I don't think they agree with me on this.
Exactly.
That's for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's still the majority in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Even after everything that happened, Boris Johnson and all, majority's still leaving. It's bizarre for me, right? It's just a bizarre joke for me.
It does seem that way.
And I'm happy with it because the Nexit, which is the Netherlands exit, the vote has become much lower since everything that happened. So great. We realized what stupid move it was.
Yeah, same thing happened in Sweden. Like, there was a bunch of people who, like, Sweden should leave the EU. Looked at England, like, actually, no.
Let's hold fire for a bit, at least.
There is an argument that all the chaos that's been happening hasn't been because of Brexit, but because Brexit hasn't happened. We've spent 3 years not doing Brexit. And that's because, one, I'm not sure it's possible, and two, no one in power wants it to happen, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Not enough.
And it is
Not
an
enough.
impossible situation. What the British people want is a divorce with benefits, right? They want a divorce from the EU, and they want to still be able to come round for cuddles every night when it's convenient. That's sadly not how divorces work.
But aren't there really 3 groups here? We've got Remainers, leave with a deal, and leave with no deal. So it seems to me that it's almost a bit of a political stalemate.
Yeah.
It's going to be 2 of the groups, or at least one, are always going to be unhappy whatever happens.
Well, you made a point. It's fractured within 3 groups, and you need half a majority. You can't get it when it's fractured in 3 groups.
That does smack of gerrymandering to me.
But also,
I could also divide the Remainers into, okay, what sort of EU would you want? What would you want Britain's position to be? You could divide it always and then claim that they no longer had a majority, right? And I would say, actually, that a lot of people, it's not that they want a no deal. They just think our strongest negotiating position is North Korean diplomacy, threatening a no deal in order to get what you want, and we're going to negotiate stronger if we're not on the other side of the table, opposite the EU, all disagreeing with each other and showing that we're fractured and divided.
My point wasn't to divide the leavers into 2 different groups, but just in terms of how happy are people going to be with Brexit, who's going to be satisfied.
Yeah.
It seems like whichever way you cut it, there's going to be quite a big group of people who are not satisfied.
And there's more divisions beyond that, because even like a Norway-style deal wouldn't please everyone. A Switzerland-style deal wouldn't please everyone. And by not please everyone, I mean fuck up the border between Ireland and Northern Ireland entirely.
But the reason why Leave won is because they managed to promise everything to all these blocks. Like, had the option been 3 different types of leave, then Remain would have won, because 50% of the people said, well, we want to stay, whereas 33% of the leavers, they're going to be like, well, we want Norway style, or 33% we want no deal, or 33% is going to say that, we want like a Swiss style. Leave won because they managed to just promise everything to everyone, and now they can't deliver it because it's impossible.
Yeah, there we go, solved.
Well, no, because all Remain are promising is another referendum, like the people's vote. Which I don't see how that solves anything. Does anyone think another referendum would fix this?
No.
No, because like, if the other side now wins, if Remain wins, you're going to have like half a nation full of angry people thinking that democracy is a sham. You know, bunch of gammons rioting in the street and all the rest of it. No offense to my friend who did vote for leave, because I'm assuming he just doesn't want to see me again. If you vote to leave, then time's running out. A second referendum is going to do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So what can we talk for a minute about the Northern Irish and Irish border? Because to me, it seems like there's still quite a bit of tension there. It seems like it's almost a fragile peace. There is peace. It's been stable for a long time, but it seems with Brexit that things are maybe flaring up. What's your take on that?
I saw a poll somewhere where it said that there's actually growing interest in Northern Ireland for reunification, and that the hardcore unioners are actually losing political leverage there.
Yep, although Northern Ireland will always be split 50-50. So although half the people would love that, the other half... You'd struggle to make the case.
Hasn't Ireland been quite clear that no deal is hard border? There's been little softening from Ireland, I think, on that subject.
Yeah, I think the vice prime minister or president, I'm not sure which one it was, the vice guy said yesterday.
He has like a special title.
Yeah, basically that no deal would mean hard border, and they're very against that.
But that's the reality.
Well, they can't, because it's the Good Friday Agreement. They can't put hard border in there because it categorically goes against the Good Friday Agreement. So it has to be an open border, which means that you have to allow the free movement of people, which the immigration hardliners are against. Yeah, you're kind of stuck with that Irish backstop.
This is Britain's problem.
Which is what May's deal was. You should have accepted it. Why
so
didn't
complicated, and our history is so complicated, and we don't have much agility in negotiations, right? Like, so many things that are going to fuck up, from Gibraltar to the Northern Irish border.
Why not give Northern Ireland sovereignty, give them independence, and let them, have their own little referendum if they want to be a part of the UK or not?
Yep.
I don't think anyone's against that. You just end up with a 52-48 split, which
and
would leave most people pretty pissed off.
It's like a fractalized problem, right? It gets smaller, infinitely, but it's still the same.
It's fractal all the way down to local governments, yeah.
This is the problem with democracy, right? Like, it's not enough to win. You need to listen to the minority as well. So much of this is the Conservative Party's fault. The referendum could have been worded differently and more clearly. They could have handled their leadership contest a little bit different. My friend Dan said to me last week, and I thought this was beautiful, that the real architect of fucking up Brexit was Michael Gove. Do you remember when he betrayed Boris Johnson during the Tory leadership contest last time round and stopped him from winning?
I can't remember it, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Okay, so Michael Gove at the 11th hour, just after Brexit had been announced, published front page about how Boris Johnson was incompetent and not fit for leadership. And it
and how
both
history
their
proved him wrong. Anyway, yes.
Killed both of their careers. May ended up being in power because she was the least offensive person.
And she voted to remain. Anyway, yes.
Yes. Which is why a lot of people thought she was the best person for the job, because fundamentally she didn't believe the hype, and she was negotiating from a position of, well, I have to do this. She's not combative or negative with the EU. She's like, we just have to do what the people voted for. Right? That was the philosophy at the time. Dan's point, and I thought it was beautiful, is that if Boris had been leader of the Conservative Party then, he'd have been lucky to negotiate the same deal as May. The point is, he would have come back and said to all the hard Brexiteers, I've won the deal you wanted, this is it, and pushed it through and made it happen. As it stands now, he's stuck because he can't just accept May's deal. You can't run on a platform of no change. There's nothing exciting about that. He's not going to negotiate a better deal. And so we're just stuck in a gridlock.
Yeah. It became impossible after they voted down May. May had a reasonable deal. It was tried so many times.
But the thing is that before May's deal, she screwed herself over as well by calling an election, because she thought like, oh, well, I'll just increase my majority. Lost the majority, had to go into bed with the DUP, which then brought the Irish question into the forefront. And so she basically just shot herself in the feet twice, because,
Right.
Yeah, because otherwise she wouldn't have to consider the DUP position. However, she needs, because, they're sort of unionist hardliners.
It would have been more like Gibraltar. North Ireland, right?
Yeah.
Less of an issue.
Yeah, exactly. But because she needed DUP to actually have a majority after the election that she called, just hamstrung herself. But on the whole thing, I reckon that if Parliament was ever serious about Brexit, they would have called for an emergency, they would have called for an
It wasn't.
emergency government, a bipartisan emergency government from the
Right.
get-go,
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
spending 3 years just using it as a political stick to beat each other.
But this is the problem. Parliament never was serious about Brexit. But both the British Parliament and the EU never wanted it to happen. Ever. And no one wants to be responsible, like running the ship when Brexit happens. And no one also wants to be the person responsible for killing Brexit. So we've just had 3 years of political grandstanding and speeches. No
Well,
one
Yeah,
really
now you put a
wanted to do
buffoon
it.
in power who doesn't care.
The Hulk, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I reckon that Theresa May should have just told British people that, oh, no, I'm negotiating Brexit. It's fine. We've left the EU. Yeah, everything's fine. Because nothing would change. People didn't know or care if they were part of the EU before this happened. And if nothing changed after it happened, they'd be like, oh, right, we're out of the EU. Oh, great. Can we get bendy bananas? Why would you want that? Yeah.
That would have been the best solution, I think, Toby. You've nailed it.
I
there.
mean, if we're saying that politicians just lie to the people, yeah, fuck it, just go for a big lie.
We'll just keep lying. Yeah.
And the EU could have helped, saving some face. However much was on the bus, they'd have been like, yeah, sure, we've now earmarked that amount for the NHS. And all the immigration fears that were never based in reality were, let us reassure you that, we've now signed a contract with David Cameron, and indeed millions of Turkish immigrants won't be showing up on your doorstep next week. Okay, good, everyone happy.
But isn't that what Boris was
Solved.
trying to do? Like, no deal. It's gonna be fine. We're just gonna exit. I'll just sign it. Done. It will be fine. The house is not on fire. We'll survive. Except then Parliament voted against no deal again. Because she keeps saying we can't do the no deal. Even though almost all logistical business companies have prepared for no deal now for 1.5 years. That's been the most likely scenario in the business world. Well, it's been a very seriously
In fact,
considered.
I think 1.5 years ago, Goldman Sachs were putting the most money on Brexit not to happen. But the problem is with how business mitigate risks, they have to prepare for the worst case scenario, right? There's no sense in preparing for something that's not going to be a problem or an issue.
I really want to see Operation Black Swan. You all heard about Yellowhammer.
Yeah.
It was like the baseline scenario of no deal, and it was leaked. And then people asked the government for it. They said, okay, we'll release it. And they just released the same report. But they changed base case scenario to worst case scenario. And then Nicola Sturgeon saw the original and said, no, that's not. It's not the worst case, is it? So there's a theoretical document called Operation Black Swan, which goes into a lot of detail about the worst case scenario. I guess they don't want to scare people and probably destroy the economy if that gets
Project
leaked.
Fear.
Yeah, Project Fear. But it has to be planned
I
for,
mean,
doesn't it?
I'm preparing already. I mean, this was saying earlier about no-deal Brexit. Brilliant. I'm just going to load up a suitcase of baked beans, fly over to England, and buy the town of Swindon. It's going to be awesome. You have to think ahead. I mean,
Stock up on your HP sauce, your
Yeah.
Worcester sauce,
it's just
your baked
rolling
beans.
tobacco. It's actually just like pouches of rolling tobacco, buying favors. I mean, I don't know. I try and make myself like a minor lord. That's gonna be good.
Yeah, minor lord, right? Yeah.
Like a smuggler lord.
Recruit an army of
Yeah.
Irish mercenaries, conquer Cornwall. That's gonna be great.
So does anyone have a beyond binary take on Brexit rather than just leave Remain?
It's a really weird thing, like sort of beyond binary. Like leave or remain. It's a fairly binary choice, surely.
Not really. Because leaving is not a binary thing. You have the Norway deal, the Switzerland deal. It wasn't binary. It was presented as binary, but it is not.
It feels like we should go back to 2016 and tell these people this.
Yeah, but you can't negotiate by committee, right? Like this is what's been so frustrating. My dad, coming at it from a business perspective, he is a strong Remainer, but you can't imagine going into a negotiation with the opposing side and everyone dividing amongst themselves and disagreeing in front of the opposition. Like, no wonder Germany wiped the floor with us. So broken as a negotiating team. And so the vote was, you guys, as our parliamentarian representatives, go and negotiate the best leave you can. And
That's not exactly what happened, though, is it? It's that Theresa May went in with a bunch of red lines that were completely unrealistic. It wasn't because they were negotiating by committee that it went so badly. It went so badly because she had the red lines and she said, what can you give me while not violating those red lines? And it was like, well, basically WTO rules, but we can give you this little thing. And she said, well, that's not good enough, or rather the Parliament or the people did. But it wasn't because of the negotiating by committee that it messed up.
Well, she triggered Article 50 far too early. I mean,
Maybe that's why.
It's definitely. I mean, it's a stupid thing to do. Like they didn't have a position before they triggered it. It's a bit stupid.
Yeah, it was very.
But
very
then again, that
rash.
is my take. That's my take on entire Brexit. It's a little bit stupid.
Yeah, that was the first major tactical blunder, right? Like,
And you know, even the Remain, I was going to say, even the Remain is not a binary position either, because the EU is not a static thing, right? The EU can integrate further, or the EU can decentralize a bit more in the future. There can be a united army. They might not be. The UK always had their own currency. They could also adopt the euro, integrate further. Remain is not an entirely binary choice either.
I mean, you could enact strict immigration controls if you want to do that. I mean, you have these options within the EU. Do what is it Belgians do, where if you haven't got a job within 3 months, they'll just kick you out.
Yeah, that's EU law. So it was the UK's choice
And
whether to enforce
the UK
that or
didn't,
not.
because you love 0-hour contracts and cheap immigrant labour.
the perception was with the Syrian migration crisis that more and more people were flooding in.
It had a lot to do with
And
it.
why was that? It's because Nigel Farage and that poster of Syrian refugees, which he stood in front of, which is fundamentally racist. And yet that's somehow allowed. That's acceptable. It's like he's not been punished in any way for that.
Again, I'm sure.
That's terrible.
Referring
That's
to a
terrible.
bunch of migrants as a invading swarm of insects,
Swarm.
historically hasn't any sort of negative connotations. Dehumanizing people for their otherness. I mean,
The problem is, guys, as pro-immigration as we are, I think probably the three of you say you don't believe in borders, right? If that's your case, you need to persuade the majority of people in a democratic company to believe it. And right now, as frustrating as that is for liberals, that isn't the case. And democracy, for all its flaws, you have a bunch of people that don't believe in mass migration. And I'd also say that I think we probably more represent the middle class than the lower class. And I do understand working classes people's fear and frustration when middle class people vote for, more immigration, it's brilliant, it's fine. Okay, but they won't be living in your neighborhood. They won't be taking
You're
your
pretending
job.
like the EU is all in favor of mass migration, which it is not.
no, it really isn't.
It's controlling migration heavily.
Yeah.
And good luck with your migration issues once you leave the EU. As was pointed out by Tobias, once India wants to make a deal.
Or the rest of the third world, I don't know. But that's the thing. What the Leave campaign say, migration hardliners, Nigel Farage, they managed to paint migration and refugees under the same brush. Like they managed to conflate the humanitarian crisis of the Syrian civil war, where millions of people fled. A percentage of them ended up in Europe, and they managed to sort of paint this as, the EU is inviting in all these third world people, and they're all going to move into your neighborhood. And people are like, oh, well, we don't want that. Whereas in reality, what happened was it's an unprecedented crisis. The EU, Germany reacted accordingly because it was a crisis, and then they tried their best to stem the flood. I mean, they spent billions of euros bribing the Turks to just stop letting people through, because the EU doesn't want mass migration. But you tell that you tell a bunch of racists that as soon as they get German passports, they're gonna come move into your neighborhood. They're gonna bring down property prices and force your children to eat falafel. I mean, it's.
Maybe that's for the best. But no, it takes about 7 years to get German nationality, I think.
It only takes one drunken night to convince a child to eat a kebab.
It was my English friend who introduced me to falafel, and I can't go back to us.
Now listen to you, immigrant-loving,
falafel pushing,
falafel munching.
Oh Christ, hummus!
Falafel's amazing.
Seriously, hummus? I don't know what's in
is
hummus, but
amazing.
oh my god, it's amazing.
Hummus is amazing.
The two together.
Hummus
The
and
two
falafel.
together.
See, you guys have been polluted, tainted by
Fuel.
foreign influence.
We are foreign.
But the
Brits,
internet
aren't we?
has told me on good authority that multiculturalism is bad, and as soon as I get that recipe for hummus, I'm all in favor of deporting all people making it, because multiculturalism is a terrible thing. I say, finishing off my tea, Scottish biscuits.
This is what I want to go beyond binary on. I think part of the reason why Remain lost the referendum is this false dichotomy that you're either with us or you're racist. And there are a lot of valid reasons to be concerned about EU leadership. That doesn't necessarily mean everyone that voted for Brexit is a racist.
No, but so participate in the democracy of the EU then. Rather than send a Nigel Farage to the EU, which is just a troll you put into the EU Parliament, send some better people.
And look, I agree. I think if we want to change the EU, the best place to do that was to take the seat at the head of the table, as we've been offered for decades, and change of the EU in the way we want. Right? That's what Germany does. That's what France do. These countries engage with the EU and influence it from inside.
Exactly.
And instead, you're right, we sent a troll to give some speeches about Churchill and World War II and the British spirit, and everyone went, yay, and it looked great on YouTube and achieved nothing.
But do you think there's a aspect of maybe British mentality that we are not technically part of the of Europe? Like, we are an island, we're a sovereign island on our own. We had the empire.
Former empire, yep, exactly.
England has historically always opposed any European power, achieving dominance over the continent. And maybe, as you're saying, like, people are seeing the EU as a economic bloc turning into a political bloc, and they don't like that. Just intrinsically, their Britishness won't allow a large, solid European Union.
Absolutely, and that's always been the position, and I'm sympathetic.
But that's idiocy. You've lost the empire, and why not be a part of a large European bloc at the head of the table, as you say, rather than be on the outside looking in, going, "Hello, guys. We got some nice, bleached chicken from America now. We had to sell the NHS, but we got really tasty chicken."
I tell you why, because of democracy. Because in order to sell this great vision you just described, you need to convince a lot of people that it's a good idea. And far from actually do that, most politicians have spent decades blaming the EU for all their problems. That's what we've been doing. The EU has been just an easy way to score cheap political points by saying vaguely anti-European
but someone
things.
should have stood up to that. Isn't it also that Corbyn is kind of pro-Brexit? Like, he didn't really defend the Remain that hard. Didn't really fight for it that hard.
He's not pro-EU, and he looked at how the EU treated Greece and austerity, and that's the thing. I never understood how the EU became a left-wing cause. Like, it's not a particularly left-wing
exactly. I mean, if you're left-wing, you really don't like the EU. But it's, as I said, it's a neoliberal trading bloc. I mean, it's for the capitalists. I don't understand why the left should be supported the EU over.
So it cuts across both.
I think there was a left-wing critique of the EU, which won a lot of Leave votes as well.
Yeah,
but it cuts across party lines, right?
Yeah, and this is why Corbyn, who is a Eurosceptic, but he sat out because he knew that half of his voting bloc are Leavers, half of them are Remainers, and he's like, oh crap. Well, if I take a very, very solid stance, I mean, he campaigned to remain. People forget this. And he's been saying that we should remain ever since. Mild distortion in British media.
But it doesn't come from the heart.
I mean, he's a Eurosceptic. But I think even us Remainers talking now, I mean, I think we still have problems with the EU. But as you say, changing from the within.
Yeah.
You can't change it from outside.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, vote Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, obviously, we're not political here, obviously, but vote Jeremy Corbyn.
I don't think we've ever claimed to be apolitical. I'm okay pushing Jeremy Corbyn. Again, it comes down to a democracy. Will he win an election? And I'm not sure he could, sadly.
I'm pretty sure that three of us aren't allowed to vote in the British elections, right? Like, I'm not allowed to vote in general election.
I am.
So...
Hey.
Finn, are you still?
Yeah, I'm still British citizen for now, so I'm allowed to vote.
What are you gonna do, Finn, if it's gonna be a hard Brexit?
Probably wait and see how bad it goes, and then potentially they become Spanish or Dutch.
A hard Brexit is bad, right?
Whatever happens, Finn will vote green. Mark my words.
For what?
You'll vote green.
I'll vote green, yeah. That's the climate crisis is far more important than Brexit. I think if we look back in 50 or 100 years, the Brexit is going to be like some weird side note.
An annoying side note.
And the climate apocalypse that's looming is going to be a far more important issue.
It's distracting, annoying side note.
Guys, one thing I'll say, it's easy to giggle at the British and the nationalism, but the EU is playing the same game in many ways. And there's various points where the EU could have offered concessions, been a bit more reasonable. I know why they haven't, politically, because they don't want any other country to follow. But this is the problem with a trading bloc that's morphed into a political bloc. They're making decisions politically.
Which concessions you want them to do?
Something vague about no immigrants. Whatever it takes. Whatever you can fit on a bus.
exactly correct yet, but they're not quite a political bloc yet, because the EU Commission doesn't have the powers to pass any laws that the national government hasn't allowed yet. I mean, every single member state still has sovereign power over their own law.
Well, sure, but when 85% of laws get rubber stamped without even review.
Yeah, but the UK can still say no to these laws, and if they haven't, then that's again, it's the UK sovereignty, not EU sovereignty. They can't dictate laws on the UK yet. Maybe in the future, if it becomes a political bloc, this might change. But as it stands, the EU is still more of a trading bloc than a political bloc.
Sure, but there was talk of an EU army.
But we're not doing any concessions because of the trading bloc issue, right? It's all border issue. It's all a trading border issue. I have not heard a single argument against Brexit that is not to do anything with customs.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem with the EU is there's so many French farmers to appease, right?
No, it's not just French farmers. It's not just French farmers. We simply do not want cheap quality goods, unchecked, unregulated, coming in through the UK, being imported into Europe without having any trading checks.
Chlorinated chickens.
And that's fair enough, because this is the union that we've made, right?
I mean, it is a mafia, but it's our mafia. And it's we are paying protection money to a mafia, and at least we get protection from this mafia. But
here's my problem: you say we get protection, but it didn't work for the Ukraine.
Is the Ukraine part of the EU?
No, it wasn't.
They wanted to join the EU, and Russia took the Crimea and then funded a bunch of paramilitaries in eastern Ukraine as a kind of warning that no, we don't want the EU. I mean, the fact that Russia has been spending a lot of money to exert influence over, for example, Brexit. I mean, we haven't even touched on
exactly.
this.
They want it.
Russia doesn't want a strong EU. And England's like, oh yeah, no, we're siding with Russians on this. Yeah, screw the EU.
Yeah, exactly. Makes you wonder, right?
Yeah.
I mean, why you follow what Putin wants?
If your views are aligned with Putin, exactly, then you have to question like, oh wait, why do we want?
What am I doing?
Yeah, there's a great theory that Putin is a judo master, right? Like, so the whole KGB sabotage, it isn't about blowing up bridges, but it's getting countries to use their own natural tendencies and forces and momentum against them. So the UK has always had this anti-British rhetoric, so Putin's going to fund a bunch of Facebook ads that are going to push us that way.
Anti-EU rhetoric, right?
Yeah. The joke as well is that, Boris Johnson, it's the same as QAnon. People think that Trump is playing five-dimensional chess, and Boris Johnson's fans are the same. They think that everything he's doing is cleverly designed to play mind games with the EU and to mess with internal politics and all of these things. And I'm not sure I've seen as much evidence.
I used to think that Johnson was a genius, but last couple of weeks I'm thinking...
Exactly. It turned out quite clearly what was the real case, right? Very fast as well.
Well, yeah, he challenged Labour to call a general election. And they didn't. And then I saw the next, because it was an obvious trap, right? And then I saw the next day the front line of the Sun. Oh, Corbyn's a chicken, and you're like, okay, was that your game? Was it that advanced? That's one-dimensional chess. That's not even checkers.
Because that's actually what I thought Johnson was doing. I thought he was playing chicken with no-deal Brexit, with the hope of calling an election and then posting himself as the savior of Brexit, increasing his majority, yada yada. But it turns out if I, an idiot on Facebook, can work this out, Jeremy Corbyn's like, nah, we're good.
Exactly. What?
I think everyone's been hoping there's been some secret move that some politician's going to pull out the bag and be like, aha, all along, this is what we really wanted.
But that would be nice, wouldn't it? It would be nice to think that actually the people in Parliament, they have like a better understanding what's happening. But all the evidence points to like, oh God, they haven't got a clue.
Yeah.
They haven't got a clue, do they?
This has been my amazement the whole time as well.
What about this for a beyond binary take on Brexit? I was talking to a few people about this recently. The idea being, you know how Theresa May said Brexit means Brexit? That's fallacy 101. That's a tautology.
Yeah.
You can't define something by using itself as a term. So no one really knows what Brexit is, what it's about. As we've been talking, it sort of seems to cover a lot of issues. So my idea is that Brexit is nothing and therefore it's everything. So it's kind of this ideological teacup, if you will, that we can just pour in whatever issues we want. So for some people, like Chris mentioned, it's about immigration. For some people, it's about trade. For others, it's about customs. For other people, it's about a sense of identity. Me personally, for example, I feel quite European. I think a lot of Remainers feel this way. So it becomes an issue about identity. It's like, don't take my European identity away, but it's not really about that as such, is it? It's about trade and it's about customs, as we've discussed. So what do you make of this kind of analogy? What do you think that explains some of it?
Yeah, I think so.
That's why you have a Brexit party now. Even that on its own. You have a party called Brexit.
With no manifesto.
It's become a cover for everything.
So it's like
they don't need a manifesto. Brexit means Brexit.
Yeah, no, I actually think that's a really good
Okay.
analogy, because the Remain side, they didn't have this. For the Remainers, it was all very specific, this one issue which we're defending. But whereas for the Leavers, it's like, oh no, it's as you say, just keep on filling up that teacup. It's like, oh, it is immigration, it's sovereignty, it's breaking free, it's taking back control. No, we just keep on topping up that teacup. Whereas the Remainers are like, oh no, that's all wrong. But we have a very specific thing that we can't defend the EU really, because it's a mafia how we're defending the EU. But we think that this is the right thing to.
I think it works for the Remain side too, because for some people it's about identity, others it's about freedom of movement, some people it's about more open borders, for others it was a variety of different things. For some it's like, oh, no chaos, we don't want chaos.
No one can really passionately get behind those issues, really. Like, I mean, even the Remainers, they'd be like free trade, booyah!
Well, freedom of movement is a great thing to get behind. And that's also what fuels the identity.
Yeah, but it's hard to protest something that's going to go, right?
It's impossible to win an election with. The majority of people don't like the sound of free movement until they go on holiday to Spain.
Yeah, until they retire in Spain, right? I mean, come on. Yeah. It cuts both ways. Yeah.
Free movement for white people. That's what we want.
Oh, I thought you were talking about immigrants, not expats.
Specifically certain white people, not so much the Poles and the Romanians, but, paid as they may be.
Yeah.
No, Toby and Finn made a beautiful point in that Brexit was broad, complicated, mental to put down to a single binary vote, and at the same point the side of Brexit had a very clear strategy, messaging, marketing, and it's very hard for Remain to be honest. They didn't want to run on a platform of the beauty of free movement because they knew that for 40% of the population that just wouldn't resonate well with at all. In fact, Labour have lost elections because they've conflated immigration policy with racism, right? It just doesn't hit in any country in Europe. This isn't just a British thing, right?
We see that over here as well.
If a politician ran in Germany on open the borders, they wouldn't do very well.
Don't forget also the influence of Cambridge Analytica. They've been proven to have had UKIP databases, and they were able to target people very specifically with very new type of technologies that we're seeing now being implemented in worldwide politics that we didn't see before. It's a new thing.
Yeah, apparently Brexit was the dry run for Trump's campaign, right?
And it's effective, as we see.
Yes, but again, that doesn't invalidate the result. The invention of radio and the first politician that promoted himself well on radio didn't invalidate the referendum. And so these technologies, even arguably Obama used Facebook marketing better than his opponents, right? We just need to understand these technologies and make the laws and checks and balances moving forwards. But we can't keep invalidating elections every time a new way of promoting yourself.
Right.
Switzerland did recently. They overturned an election because they felt that the people were misinformed on the issue, so they reheld the referendum with the new information at hand. That's my first point. My second point is, Chris, at what point in this slippery slope do you say enough is enough? Like, do you have to have literally like an ideas gun pointed at people and putting ideas in their head? Like, at what point does it not become democratic anymore? Because isn't that a fundamental part of democracy? It's like with an informed vote. Because if you have an uninformed vote, is that part of democracy?
We're going on 3 years and we still haven't done a Brexit yet. So
but that's just dodging the question. Like,
well, no, but that's my point, is that you can't keep avoiding doing the thing that was voted for and then enough evidence mounts that you're like, see, we never should have done it anyway. A lot of the
But Switzerland say you can, drama, like there's plenty of...
I don't imagine it would be as popular here. I don't think it'd go down well. You would have Gammons rioting on the streets if you invalidated Brexit because you didn't like what was printed on a bus.
I'm sorry, but at the moment, this is the 11th hour, and we're sort of discussing things that should have happened in the first hour. Like, Theresa May should have, or whoever was in charge of Brexit in the beginning, should have looked at like, oh, it's almost a 50-50 split. Seems like this is a contentious issue. We should probably explore this further. How about a new referendum where we ask people, what sort of Brexit would people like? Like, yes, you've said yes, and then we have follow-up questions after that.
Or if not another referendum, you say, okay, this is a close call, so therefore we need to come up with a solution that's
exactly.
gonna appeal
It
to
seems
both
like
sides,
Yeah.
right? And honestly, that should have been a dodge for fucking Cameron. He dodged the bullet. He should have said, okay, I started this. I'm going to make sure that we start working on this in an intelligent way, in a way that appeases both sides. But just like he did when he finished an interview, just turned around and walked away, right? He did the same with Brexit. He went, fuck this, whoops.
Unbelievable. He's back now, isn't he? He's just had his trotters up in Nice, as Danny Dyer said. You know, and now he's back. He's just back, and everyone's like, all right, okay, yeah, that's fine.
Who would have thought that a man with the complexion of a jellyfish has no backbone? It's
The sad truth is, Dave Miliband could have beat Cameron. And if Ed Miliband could eat a sandwich, I think he would have as well.
Oh, come on. It's not because he couldn't eat a sandwich, is it?
No, it was because Rupert Murdoch hated him, which is why they're printing pictures. Everyone probably has a photo of them eating disgustingly at some point.
Right.
Take a photo of someone sneezing, they're not going to...
this is why when I become politician, I'm just going to stop eating.
It's too late. We already have the photos.
That would be
Toby.
one way to limit term times of politicians.
I should probably scrub my Facebook of all pictures of me just ingesting
But
drugs
that's
as
too
well.
late. The Wayback Time Machine will have...
That's way too late
look
for
at-
that.
That's
look
why
at
no
Trudeau.
interesting people go into politics. Anyone that's had a fun childhood is excluded from politics.
Theresa May used to run through the fields of
The
wheat.
fields. Oh, I thought that was wheat fields. That was what I voted for. I thought she was cool. Wheat, you said. Oh my god.
Wheat. No,
She's
not
a lot less
weed.
exciting than I was led to believe.
That's what her husband does. Her husband runs through all the weed fields and sells it.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you guys know this? Jacob Rees-Mogg is one of the largest producers of weed.
And Theresa May's husband.
There you go.
And the UK is one of the biggest exporters globally of medical cannabis.
Right, so
How
the
about
UK
Rule
does
Britannia.
have something which it's worth exporting. Oh, fair enough. I
Right.
thought it was just
There
like
you go.
Yeah, there you go.
tea-cozies and racism.
Photos of the Queen.
I did not know. I've been to England. Like, how do you grow anything there? It's
Hydroponics, isn't it? Massive warehouses, I guess.
yeah, I suppose.
We should be doing
No,
more of that.
hemp's
We should be
brilliant.
growing loads of
Yeah,
hemp.
Hemp is
Planting
absolutely brilliant.
loads and loads. I read an article today. This is off topic, but you can make wood out of
You can-
hemp.
Yeah.
That's amazing, isn't it?
You can
Ac-
make...
So
Actually,
the
Oh,
UK
well
could be
done.
exporting
I just
hemp wood
realised I'm an
globally
idiot
and make
because
loads
I
of money.
knew all of this. So, like, you guys had a massive hemp industry, back when you still ruled the waves. Something to do with
Yeah, same for Holland.
yeah. I mean, yeah, hemp's
Hemp
bloody
was huge for us. It was sails, rope. We built our ships from hemp. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
We traded in hemp.
I've seen fat kids on banana boats on the beaches of Spain. Let me assure you, we still rule the waves.
I mean, to be fair, that's another thing which I'm really looking forward to. Like, as soon as you throw off the shackles of EU, you'll be able to invade France, reconquer Normandy,
Yay!
take back Aquitaine. I'm not sure if the royal family ever
rightfully
renounced their claim on the French crown, but I mean, they have no royalty at the moment, so I think it's just free real estate.
It's free real estate.
Yeah, and the EU doesn't have an army, so
Exactly. We just need to team up with Russia, carve Europe up, make it
Yeah, then
East
we're
and
fucked.
West Europe.
then we're hardcore fucked.
yeah, I think you're seeing this completely wrong. Like, kind of, we're thinking that no, everything's going to go wrong after Brexit. No, it's an opportunity to reinstate the empire.
Hopefully not.
First France, then
It won't
India.
be Western Europe, it'll be Eastern UK. It won't be Eastern Europe, it'll be Western Russia. Beautiful.
And and considering the dogs then over at across the Atlantic, I mean, I think it's high time to take back the colonies as well. There's some serious mismanagement over the pond.
It's already
I mean,
happening. That's why Harry married Meghan Merkel, right? Like, it's the start of American royalty.
Also, Boris Johnson, born in America, he's eligible to run for the US presidency. So I look forward to president.
Do you reckon he'll do one up on Schwarzenegger and try and become president of the US? That'd be hilarious.
I'm hoping so. I am hoping so.
I wouldn't wish that on anyone, though.
I'd wish that upon the Americans. No offense to your American listeners.
I
You
mean,
are
the
lovely.
Americans have described him as Trump but smart, so that he probably would be appeasable to both sides, right?
He just sounds smarter because he knows Latin, whereas Trump is struggling.
The thing
with
is,
English.
he's pretty clever. he knows about history and stuff. He's pretty well educated.
Yeah.
He's not an
Politically,
idiot. That's
for his own self-interest, he's played this Brexit thing quite well.
I think Boris Johnson was always going to be much better behind the scenes. Like bringing him to the forefront, into the spotlight, kind of a lot of his skills are kind of wasted there. I think he's much better.
Like Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
Right? Jeremy Corbyn should be the moral anchor of the Labour Party. He's probably not going to win an election, sadly, as much as I personally love him.
Well, I mean, I love Jeremy Corbyn. I'm really in favour of his policies to, was it execute or deport the royal family? Turn all the palaces into council houses.
I think it was deport.
Yeah. Guillotine the
I think
bourgeoisie.
I've just changed my opinion on Jeremy Corbyn.
No, seriously. Why is Jeremy Corbyn such a threat to the UK? Like, what does he want to do?
The bloody postmodern neo-Marxist.
It's a Marxist, right?
Yeah, that's what Peter's
Communists are still scary.
Neo-Marxist, postmodern liberal.
Guys, you don't deport your royals, you marry them off to foreign powers.
And build an no, that's not what you do.
Whoops, we got excited. So does anyone have an inspiring quote about Brexit?
Is there anything inspiring about Brexit?
Yeah, Brexit means Brexit.
Brexit means
Yeah,
Brexit.
that's the one. Yeah.
It's definitely not a tautology. There's no logical fallacies anywhere in these arguments.
It just is.
Brexit is by far my second favourite breakfast cereal.
What's your first?
I don't know. Frosties,
You'd
probably.
have to put it to a referendum.
Cinnamon Grahams.
People's choice.
Oh, what a great cereal.
Oh, yeah, no, cinnamon Brexit is my number one favourite. But we can't have cinnamon Brexit because, hardline immigration.
I don't think we need to go through logical fallacies. This entire conversation has been a tour of logical fallacies of the world.
As I said before, I think it's too late to discuss what we should have done, and instead just accept that there are very few positive outcomes, and one of them is that Norwegian style deal. That's the best you can hope for right now.
That's your vote.
Which is
Chris,
pretty
you think
close
it's
to
not going to
May's
happen?
deal. No, hopefully we get May's deal. I think economically uncertainty is more damaging than outcome. You already see that with the British markets. I think whatever Brexit happened now would be...
You guys are already hemorrhaging GDP. I mean, and you lose a ludicrous amount of money per week just in loss of GDP. And, you guys got a recession coming, so enjoy that.
Well, there's an argument, and I said this to you, Toby, when the recession comes, wouldn't we be better out of the EU so we don't have to bail out Greece?
But the recession's coming to the UK because of Brexit.
And the recession's coming worldwide anyway.
Well, a no-deal Brexit would trigger a big recession worldwide, I think.
I mean, yes, there might be some tiny inherent flaws with capitalism, but maybe there's not time to discuss those here. Boom bust.
Oh no, it's always time to discuss the inherent flaws of capitalism.
Yeah, literally perpetual recessions coming and going, screwing over the working class to the benefit of the rich.
But that's the dream.
On that cheery note.
I found out recently that a weak pound will make it easier to buy property. So, good on the property classes. I think they need more property.
Yeah.
Oh, and me personally, my business, I'm benefiting massively because it's never been cheaper for European clients to hire me. So when they ask for a discount, I just laugh and go, look at the value of the pound. You've never had a better discount.
Bingo.
And then this is how we stop immigration. Who would want to immigrate here right now? See, it's clever.
Maybe it's a long-term game. Yeah, make the UK so undesirable that no one.
Well,
wants
you're
to
not even
invade.
joking. Like, there's huge amounts of people leaving the UK.
Oh, yeah. No, I have a lot of Polish people who have worked here for 10, 20 years, and now, with the money they've made, converting it back to zloty no longer makes sense. They're going to go start a business in Poland. The economy's booming there, right?
Yeah.
Not just the small ones. I think I'm not sure about the exact number. I've heard 130 big multinational companies moved at least a certain part of their headquarters for tax reasons to the Netherlands, trade reasons. Thank you for the income. We'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
Netherlands, Ireland.
When we've got the climate of Jamaica and the weed as well, they'll all come crying back. Netherlands will be underwater. It'll be a scuba diving resort.
Climate of Jamaica, massive hemp industries. Yeah, I mean, I can see you having some niche.
It might not be all bad.
You guys still make good music, and even if your financial sectors might be moving to, was it Strasbourg or Frankfurt, who's hoping to take all your business? I'm sure England will still be fine. You'll be right.
Still make money on tax savings
Yeah.
and all that. Hidden money globally.
It's just I still have this sneaky suspicion that it is the poorest who are going to suffer because, of course, it is.
It always is.
Yeah.
That's how the system's set up.
Yeah, and I think after this referendum, how about another referendum if you should maybe, I don't know, abolish capitalism, impose state socialism?
Get rid of the class
Corbyn.
system.
And legalize marijuana
Get
first.
rid of the
yeah.
class
Wanna
system.
be
because
Jamaica.
we got rid of our lords and puppets.
No, but they're unelected bureaucrats. We need them to give a balance to the elected system.
Yeah, actually,
You know?
you guys still have a House of Lords.
Oh yeah,
Why?
unelected. Because we love unelected bureaucrats. But only when they're in the UK, not when they're in Europe.
There are unelected bureaucrats appointed by the Queen.
And various political parties.
The Queen,
which
who is
weird.
second or third generation immigrant from the EU.
Shh, don't say that. Don't let the secret out. People don't know that yet. They're going to go nuts when they find out.
They were geniuses to change their name to Windsor from Saxe Corbett.
Change your name.
Yeah.
They're not into got the surname's Windsor. Windsor's well old.
Right, again, I hate to rehash my earlier points, but Theresa May should have lied to the people, said that yes, we enacted Brexit, just told all the EU migrants that you have to change your names at the border. Just anglicize your names. You're all Johnson. You're Smith. You're Davids.
You're May.
Yeah.
Just
Name them all May Johnson and Rees Mogg. That'd be hilarious.
But Rees Mogg sounds...
There's a lot of Rees Moggs around these days.
Forever taint their surnames. I think that seems as natural point as any to end.
Well, thanks very much, Toby, for coming on.
Absolute pleasure. It was an honour to be here.
Yeah, pleasure.
From London, I'm Finn.
From London, I'm Chris.
From Amsterdam, I'm Marijn.
From Stockholm, I'm Toby.
Is big finance to blame? Russian bots, some would claim. Were the Germans too undemocratic? We're not Europeans, we're not Brussels peons. They made it all seem so bureaucratic. We don't wanna be the ones holding on to Greece's dead sins. We were tired of playing the fool, never known whether we're out or we're in. Politicians should not have blamed Brussels, but they did, and it made us so mad. Sorry, Europe. Would a referendum make you sad? When you lie on a bus, it's a game, what's the fuss? It's not fair, but who cares when you're winning? Tories needed a leader, a Brexit believer, not a referendum with Farage grinning. No, I don't wanna be the one scratching a phantom limb. Tired of playing the fool who won't walk away from a game we can't win. I wouldn't care if we didn't deserve it. Brexit's made us all go a bit mad. Sorry, Europe. It'd be funny if it wasn't so sad. Can we have a divorce with benefits, as claim the Brexit fundamentalist is a never-ending democratic, as claimed by Remainer fanatics to the campaign lies, and no Brexit. And how would Gammons react if we cancelled it?
I kind kind of made this point on Facebook, and I hope I'm not right, but what if it's all actually quite calculated? And it is because of the coming climate catastrophe. And so you have these powers who are like, well, fuck it, let's just turn Britain into a fortress. Let's not accept all these migrants fleeing from a uninhabitable equator, and we just can draw up the drawbridge, let Europe go under, because there are hundreds of millions of people who can't live anywhere. Maybe Brexit's a really good idea from a far right, well, let the world burn disaster.